Welcome to this presentation on the impact of stylization on face recognition. This is a joint work between INRIA and Interdigital. Whether it is in movies, video games, communications, digital humans are a key aspect of virtual entertainment. Some applications would benefit from stylized digital characters in order to better fit their respective context. For instance, whether it is an alien planet or in a fantasy world, there is an interest in being able to act as a stylized character while still being recognizable as yourself in order to increase immersion, presence, and emotional response. For instance, here you can see a character from 2009's movie Avatar, which is played by an actress. And here you can see the actress. Even though the character is an alien, there is some similarities in their facial features. This character is recognizable. The main question therefore is, what is the impact of stylizing human avatars on face recognitions? First, let's look a bit at the state of the art of face perceptions. First, information of importance is that the human face reveals a great deal of information. In most contexts, it is the feature of the human appearance that is the most revealing of the identity of the person. Depending on the view angle, factors impacting face recognition can vary. For instance, if you look at someone from the side, the shape of the nose will have a greater importance than if you look at them from the front. Thirdly, there is the other race effect, which is that people recognize better face from their own race than face from another race. So we can expect it to be even stronger when looking at faces from another species. Now let's look at avatar stylization and the perception of virtual characters. So Zell tells us that shape and texture are both crucial aspects of the appearance of the face of a virtual character. Fleming shows us that stylizing a character with the identity of an actor can increase its appeal. And finally, Daniel shows that the more non-human a non-human face is, the harder it is to recognize. So the more human a non-human face is, the easier it is to recognize. This brings us to two main questions, two hypotheses. First question is, to what degree can human faces be stylized and remain recognizable? And second is, to what degree stylized faces can be considered stylized enough? Because you could stylize a face very slightly, then you can pretty much be sure it will remain recognizable, but it won't look like an alien or whatever you want it to look like, which would be an issue. So we make two hypotheses that we will test with our study. First hypothesis is that lower degree of stylization will result in higher recognition rates, and the second is that higher degree of stylization will increase subjective recognition of the original species of the model. In order to stylize our faces, we need to use some kind of method. So we base our method on a method described in paper of Daniel 2019. There's two main aspects to this method. First is geometrical, so geometrical stylization. Here we compute the identity of a given face as the difference between the geometry of the face of this person and the geometry of the average human face, which is computed as the average of a vast amount of facial scans. Then we can add this to the geometry of a non-human face, and using a weight you can obtain more or less strong stylization of the human face. On the texture side, it's a similar approach, which is also using an average human texture, but this time we use a neural network based approach, so it's an optimization based approach, so we optimize a loss. And again, we can this technique allows us to have more or less strong stylization. which will be important for our study. So now we can generate stylized faces for any given human face and non-human face at different stylization levels, so lower stylization, higher stylization. But now there is a problem of judging the quality of the result, because there is no metric from measuring the quality of the facial stylization. And we also are interested in the impact of this weight W on face recognition. So this brings us to set up a study. So in this study we use 10 scans of human faces, 3 faces of non-humans, and we measure the recognition rates on 5 stylization levels. The first phase of a study is about testing our first hypothesis, which is that the higher the stylization will be, the harder it will be to recognize the face of the person. So we have our 10 human faces, 2 repetitions, 5 stylization levels. So per participant there is 100 subtests. We only use 1 non-human per participant, even though we have 3 in total. There's 2 factors that are measured here: stylization level, which is the within subject factor, and the non-human model, between subject factor. So here is a typical view of this first phase of our study. So we have 4 faces on the right, among which the participant has to choose which corresponds to the human face, which is shown on the left. The non-human face shown on the left is shown as a reference, so that participants can know what a typical non-human of this kind looks like. So here is a little test, if you want to try yourself. So here's a front view. We allow users during the real test to switch between side and front view. Here's only the front view. And among these 4, the answer would be this character. So you might be able to recognize it by the shape of the nose, for instance, the shape of the lips. And here are the results. So we can see that our first hypothesis is supported by the results of our study. Here is a graph of the recognition rates, average on the 10 human faces and 3 non-human faces per stylization level. So you can see that there is a decreasing performance in recognition by the participant as we increase the level of stylization. So when the stylization is very low, there is a strong recognition rate, and as it gets higher, it gets lower and lower in a near linear fashion. Now we enter the second phase of the study, where we are now testing the second hypothesis, which is that the higher the stylization level will be, the more participant will accept the output face as of the same species as the reference non-human face. So again, we test only 1 non-human per participant, but this time there is no repetitions, and we show all 5 levels of stylization at the same time, so there is only 10 subtests per participant. So the test is as follows. We show the series of 6 faces, so the original human face, and the 5 stylization levels for this human face and a given non-human face, and we ask 2 questions. First question, from the least stylized face to the most, up to which stylization can we recognize the individual? So this is a question on the recognizability of the output face. And second question, from the most stylized to the least, down to which stylization level would you consider the face to be of the same species as the reference non-human? So here we have 2 factors: stylization level within subject and the non-human model, which is between subject. And here are our results. So first result on the recognizing the identity side of the thing. So here you can see the rates at which participants judge themselves able to recognize a face. So for example, they judge themselves to recognize only the least stylized, or the two least stylized, or all of them. And here we compare this with the results of the first phase of the study, and we can observe that participants judge themselves able to recognize faces in most of the case in a way lower fashion than in the first phase of the study, where they were really had to recognize a face. So either participants do not trust themselves enough to recognize the faces, either it is easier to recognize the faces when it is shown amongst other stylized faces. And now the results of participants judging themselves able to recognize the species of the model, and we can see that, as expected, the higher the stylization level is, the more participants are accepting the result of the stylization. So this supports the second hypothesis. So in conclusion, we found that recognition rates were found to decrease linearly with the level of stylization. We found that there was a significant effect of stylization level on both assessed identity and assessed style quality. And thirdly, we found that subjective recognition rates are lower than the objective ones. So participants judge themselves able to recognize the identity of the person worse than their actual capacity when being tested in the first phase of the study. So this study has some limitations. So first, the stylization quality. We have effected the study on only one stylization method, which is on the geometry size low level, because we work with raw vertices. Perhaps a learning-based approach will allow for better geometrical stylization. Second, we have very controlled settings. We have a restricted set of identities and styles, only 2 point of view, static lighting, there is no animation of any kind. The stylization again is only on the facial mask. There is no ear stylization, there is no eye stylization, because we didn't want any outlier. For instance, if among the 10 human faces there was only one with blue eyes, it could cause some recognitions that would be too easy. And on the perceptual side, first studies that would be of interest would be to find out why do we recognize a stylized face, what factors matter, whether it is in the non-human face or in the human face. And second, how can we maximize recognition, whether it is perhaps with some animation, or from looking at the face from a certain point of view, or with another method. How can we make sure, how can we increase this ratio between, improve this ratio between recognition and the strength of the stylization. Thank you for your attention. Is there any question?